Hi, in this video I will go through the risk module within the .legal compliance platform. Risk assessments are an essential part of your compliance work, but it can also be an overwhelming task and it can be difficult to figure out where to start your risk assessments. The risk module within privacy should help you with that task. What you see on your screen here is the risk module. You will see the risk matrix showing how your current risk is. You can filter and find, for instance, high risk in the list down here, where you will see in this particular view your processing activities. If you navigate to the dashboard, you will always be able to find high and very high risk here as well, so that you can be aware of where the risks are and where you need to make a plan to mitigate your risks. In the upper right corner in the risk module, you have the possibility to change for compliance areas. So in which compliance area you are making your risk assessments. In this example, I have GDPR, but I can also switch to NIS2. And you can also select if you want to do it on a processing activity level or on an asset level. In this way, you can make different risk assessments within different types and different compliance areas. In this example, I will navigate back and make a GDPR risk assessment on a processing activity. In your upper left corner, you will find a blue button named Risk Template. You can select this and this will open your risk template. You should look at a risk template as the base for all your upcoming risk assessments. So this is the risk scenarios that you want to include in your risk assessments. We have a list of standard risk scenarios you can select between, and you also have the possibility to create your own risk scenarios if you don't want to use the standards. You simply select the ones that you want to include in your risk assessment, and when it's marked blue, it will be included in all your risk assessments from here on. These risk scenarios is of course within GDPR on a processing activity level. So if you select another cross, for instance NIS2 on an asset level, you will be presented for other risk scenarios. When you have set up your risk template, you will find your processing activities in the list down here. This list represents the same processing activities as you know from your processing activity view. So it's the same processes that we want to make a risk assessment on. In the right side of each processing activity, you have the possibility to open your risk assessment, which will open this window where you will be presented for the selected risk scenarios within this particular processing activity. Because I have selected some of our standard risk scenarios, information from the processing activity will also be supplied. So you can find each risk scenarios that is relevant for this processing activity, and then you can see that we have withdrawn some relevant information from this process. The risk assessment itself is consisting of a score of a consequence and a score of a probability. And that you are writing why do you select this consequence and why do you select this probability. So before we can validate the risk assessment as completed, you need to both give it a score and a note for how or why you have selected this score. Each of our standard risk scenarios comes with a consequence catalog you can use as inspiration. So when you are writing why you have selected this consequence, you have the possibility to select relevant consequences and supply it with your own notes. In the same way, you can write why have you selected this probability, and when I have written a note for both my consequence and my probability, the risk scenario itself will be validated as completed. The risk for the processing activity itself will be based on the highest scoring risk scenario. So if I have one risk scenario with a very high risk like this, then the risk for the processing activity as a whole will also be very high. So you could have an average score, but the highest scoring risk scenario will always be the score for the processing activity itself. And this also means that you in your list will now be able to see where is the very high risk and the high risks. And a little icon will show you that you need to figure out how to mitigate and lower this particular risk. When you have done so, it can be that you have implemented new security measures within the process. You have the possibility to create a new risk version. When you do so, you can make a version with the name that you select. And then you have the possibility to update your current risk assessments with the new information based on the part where you have updated it. So now it will look like this, and I can go to the risk assessment itself and say the consequence is lower, the probability is lower, and this way the risk for the processing activity will be lower. And in my list and in my matrix, this will be updated. But you always have the possibility to go back to earlier versions and see that the risks were higher at an earlier point.